went over a couple of basics last year. Like I said last year, we did some really in-depth, and Ange and Christy and I gave a ton of information, so always you can check that. So I'm trying not to like duplicate, even though you guys are all different from that group. But to get into more specifics maybe, and now that you've potentially done it once or twice, you've come across some problems. So, just a quick review of last month, the different levels of soil moisture. So 5 to 1, 5 being oversaturated, it's dripping out everywhere, 1 being bone dry, there's no usable moisture, and the preferred spot you want your seedlings in is at a 3, and you want to let it dry out to a 2. You do want to let it dry out to a 2, or you're going to keep them wet and you're going to get the dampening off or mold and disease. So, but fertilizing your seedlings now that they are started and coming up. So there's a few different, actually there's not a few different, there's really just one way to do it. But what you can use whatever. So for the first couple of weeks, you don't need to fertilize. The seed that, the plant that comes out of the seed has first leaves. Where's my little, first leaves. So they look nothing like the original or what it will look like, right? So you've all seen these, and I often get the big leaves at the bottom are turning yellow and dying. That's okay. Eventually. Not at first, but okay. They have all the energy in that little seed, no matter how small it is, to start this plant off for a couple of weeks. So all you have to do is keep it moist and alive, and that's it. You don't have to aggressively water it because it's too weak for too much playing around with, and you don't have to fertilize it because you'll probably burn it more than anything, and it has everything packed in the seed that it needs. So once you get the true leaves forming, that's when you can start to think about watering. So you can see all of them look nothing like what the plant will actually eventually look like in the future. So what do you use to fertilize? These are none of my pictures. I didn't take any of these. And there's no right thing to use for fertilizer. I don't know if you can actually see the numbers on the bright screen, but Fertilizer Basics 101, NPK, those are the 3 numbers you'll see on anything. So nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium are the 3 big numbers that any plant needs. And different degrees, they do different things. So I use the mantra up, down, and all around. So nitrogen helps the plant grow up and keeps it green. Phosphorus helps the roots grow down and it gives it blooms. And then potassium helps the nutrients circle around the plants. These are super important to know if you're trying to diagnose what's wrong with your plant, because then it will point towards what's going wrong. So I just found random fertilizers online. A lot of things were saying, and I have never had worm castings, mix your seed starting with worm castings. And that's, as you saw, that it's nice and fine, silt almost, and so it's not going to hinder your baby seeds coming up, and then it'll just give it a gentle fertilizer to start off with. For the first couple of weeks of fertilizing, you're going to want to start at a lower concentration, 25 at first, and slowly work it up to 50 on your seedlings, maybe once a week, because they really don't need much, and the more you give them, the more they're going to grow. So, but what fertilizer? So some of these are, where is it? You can see it's 090. So all it has is for roots and blooms, which is great if you are just trying to get the plant to bloom. That I would put on a plant that's a root plant, like a carrot when it's planted or something, or on a tomato when it's about to bloom, and get more blooms out of it. On a seedling, it's not going to do much because you also want some nitrogen. Not high nitrogen, but you do want some nitrogen. So usually you'll find the 3 numbers are all the same. 20, 20, 20 is probably the most common on a Miracle-Gro container, in which case you're going to want to dilute that super heavy, because that's way too much nitrogen for a baby seedling. So then, so even a 4-4-4, that's still, you still can should dilute that to begin with, and then just slowly grow up as the plant grows. But like I said, the more you fertilize, the more the plant will grow. There's others. I liked this one here. It's 6-12-6, because you do at the beginning, I just like those numbers, because you want those roots to promote that root growth in the early stages, because they're so spindly, and to be able to transplant. If you can't transplant, the better the roots, the easier it'll be for you and less stressful. And that way it just, afterwards you can switch to a different fertilizer once you want the growth. A lot of places say fish fertilizer, and this is a common one I sold all the time in a garden center, with a 5-1-1. So it's not horrible. It's got a lot of nitrogen in it, so you don't necessarily, well, not a lot. 5 is not a huge number, but you don't need to use all of that. So it still is getting some of the other nutrients. But a lot of people say fish, that's probably plenty for the size of your plant. So yeah, that's what you're going to kind of look at when you stand in front of the store or start searching online, as I just did, trying to find what I would prefer in a seedlings fertilizer, because a lot of them say, oh, use organic fish fertilizer or algae fertilizer, but the numbers in my mind, just the algae only had potassium, so therefore it's getting no nitrogen and phosphorus, which in my mind doesn't make sense. You want a little bit of a rounded number. So if worse comes to worse, find something with equal all three, because the plant will just not use the rest of it that it doesn't need. But on the flip side, which we'll get to if you give it too much. So yeah, really basic that, but those are the big three. And actually Donna touched on a bunch of other those are macronutrients. So micronutrients being the calcium, the iron, the magnesium, the boron, the sulfur, etc., which they're not going to tell you, but whatever fertilizer, so if it's an organic one like fish or worm castings, that's naturally built in. If it's a more chemical designed one, you want to make sure that that's included, because there's a lot of awesome fertilizers now with a certain crop that's available to grow, and growers want specific NPK things for its different stages, and they often don't add the micros into there. They make you buy the micros separate. So you can buy the micros separate, but if you buy something that just says N or whatever, it's not necessarily going to have the micros in it. So look at the back, make sure that you're getting a well-rounded fertilizer, because now that you can play around with the fertilizer quite a bit if you keep looking. So you've got your plant growing. The true leaves have come out. It's getting a little bit tall. I don't know if the slide's super easy to see, but different deficiencies cause different ailments in the plant. Do I need to be out of the way, Donna? Yeah, okay. And so like I said, questions you can ask to figure out which deficiencies those are. I'm going to read off of that because I didn't write it down. So, is the discoloration of the leaf on newer or older growth? Some of the nutrients are stagnant and don't move after they've been established in the leaf. So if it's on older growth, then the plant is sucking all the nutrients it needs to support the newer growth. If it's on the newer growth, then it's a stagnant mineral, and it will be something totally different. What parts are decolored on the leaf? So as you can see, some of these leaves, the veins look white, and then there's yellow, or they're white and or green and yellow, speckled and white, or brown spots and whatnot. So each nutrient causes different reactions because they're doing different things in the plant. So it's really awesome to be able to diagnose your plant because of exactly the way it looks. To quickly go over some things, so then you ask, what have I been feeding it? Because if you've been feeding it a little heavier, you might actually have a toxicity. So too much feed in the soil, which now you're going to start killing your plant. You're going to get brown edges around the sides, being narcosis, so dead plant tissue, and that you can't come back from those leaves are done. So in that case, if you think you're feeding it too much, you actually want to flush the plant out, meaning just drench it, let it drain, and hopefully get all the fertilizer out and start over again. So that way you can bring it back. Like I said, what color are the veins? So that can also lead to it. Is the leaf misshapen? Some of the nutrients support cell growth and whatnot, so if it's not getting that nutrient, the cell's not growing properly, so your leaf is curling, crinkling, and doing a whole bunch of weird things. So nitrogen, if it's not got enough nitrogen, which in a seed starting soil and you haven't put worm castings in it or anything, is probably got nothing in it. So the plant growth is reduced, yellowing leaves because there's a lack of chlorophyll. Older leaves are dying back and yellowing, and it's slowly spreading to the newer leaves. And it's, stunted growth because it's not growing as tall. You might have one pepper on this side and it looks like you think it should, but these peppers are a little smaller and they're kind of yellowing. That's the nitrogen. Phosphorus, stunted growth of roots and new shoots. So if you pull your plant out of the plug and see that it's not as developed, again, like I said, up, down, and all around, that means it's not got enough phosphorus. Potassium, yellowing around the edge of the leaves and leading to narcosis, being the dead leaf cells, because it directly, again, affects the cell wall thickness. So a deficiency in that will result in it starting to kind of crinkle and die around the edges because it's pulling away, trying to protect the center of the plant rather than letting the edges move or die. It can also, again, reduce growth and a yield of tomatoes later on in the season, or fruit, I should say. So then you get, those are the big three ones. So a little bit different in each of their effects of a deficiency. Calcium, it is immobile in plants. So this is where you're going to see a malformation in the new plant or new growth. It's more rare. You'll see it more with tomatoes later on that you have calcium deficiencies, because that's where you get the blossom end rot, is a calcium deficiency. But calcium in the ground is usually pretty plentiful. Magnesium, that is necessary for uptake of phosphorus. So if you're seeing phosphorus, which is, again, older leaves develop actually a purple color and the roots aren't growing as much, then it might also be you might need to give it phosphorus and magnesium so that the plant can uptake the phosphorus. Right? It's so complex. And I had to write this down and look it up. I've learned it a million times, so you just have to, I'm just kind of telling you that each one is actually pretty specific, and it's kind of neat that you can diagnose it. Sulfur, it will inhibit nitrogen intake, so sometimes if you're like, I'm feeding it nitrogen, it might be just the sulfur that is low because it can't take it up without the sulfur. And then all the others, like I said, zinc, boron, manganese, iron, the leaves will start to turn yellow, the veins will start to turn different colors, and from there you can just figure out through searches what is specifically going on. So that's where you got to be specific. Is the vein green? So iron is actually a super common deficiency, just because of the pH in the soil. and plants' intake of pH. I'm getting really sciencey. Plants like, a lot of plants like lower pH, and that's because it's primed for better nutrient uptake. So if you have, so 7's neutral, right? But soil usually likes to sit, if you add peat moss, it sits around 6, 5.5. That's where plants love to be. I know there are soil tests you can get to take at home. I've never actually tried to see how accurate they are. But iron, you add some plant-specific iron to it, and it will usually turn back. Petunias. Petunias are a horrible one. If you want to see iron-deficient ones, go to a greenhouse late in the summer, and they're likely all iron-deficient because they take so much iron, and if you've watered it, the pH is high again, and they become iron deficient. They don't like taking up iron. That is, like I said, that's not my picture. I wish it was. It was a good find, but also shows different resources on the internet can help you pretty quick figure out what you're seeing is correctable, usually by fertilizing and or watering. Okay, so now you have some healthy plants growing along, and I learned this, and I've kind of seen it. When you seed, you get the little seeds. Some are easier, like a pepper or tomato. They are big enough to get 1 per cell. Others are too small and you just don't care, and you're going to just kind of get even amounts, or at least 1 or 2 in each, which will probably turn into 5 or 6, into each cell. But you don't necessarily all want them to stay like that, because they're going to start fighting for competition. Now, I actually heard that if you do plant more than 1 per cell, you have a higher germ rate than if you plant only 1 per cell. So you see your packet, it says 80% germ rate. That means if you plant 100, you're going to get 80 plants. You plant 2 per cell, you're going to get more, just because the plants interact with each other, and that you get more. So whether you wanted 100 or you just wanted 50, that's the question. So there's a few different options. So like up here, this is way too many in 1 cell. You can either start to thin them now or wait. There's a few different methods, either gently, if the root's still, if you know the root's still just going to be a little string, just carefully tug a few out. Which ones do you want to tug out? If they all look the same, the ones that are on the edge of the pot, the ones that are too close together, the one that might be the smallest, so that one's a touch bigger than that one, so maybe I'll take that one out, and this guy's too close to the edge. So you kind of just have to pick and choose and hope that you bet on the right plant, and then nurture that. If you don't, if you've waited a little too long because time, and the roots are a bit too much for you to pluck them out, then you just go in with some snips and carefully snip the different ones apart. So this is in the garden, so I mean the carrots, he's just snipping the carrots. He's not going to let continue, and that will just kill them. That's nothing wrong with that. But if you planted in doubles so that you only had 20 seeds, you wanted all 20 peppers, and so you planted in doubles, you can separate them, let them get a little bit bigger, and then tease them apart. And really you can be pretty, I'm not going to say rough, but more rough than you think you can be with the roots. They'll usually survive. Let them get a little bit more solid, and then the plants should be able to just tease apart nicely. Pop quiz. What's wrong with this? I came across this picture, I'm like, this is perfect. Sorry? Okay. Donna?
They're long and leggy.
Yeah. All right. Right, exactly. So everyone basically said they're long and leggy. It doesn't show the whole picture, but there was someone on the internet going, how do I save these? So you can totally tell this is the window, and they're just growing towards the window, so they had no extra light. And the plants are all growing that way. Are they savable? Are they worth it? If you only had 20 seeds and those are your 20 seeds, you try and save them. Otherwise, try again. But also what I noticed was this dirt. I mentioned last month, people asked if they can use garden soil, and I kind of said no. And that dirt is super clumpy, super thick. I can tell it's so compact. It's not letting moisture through. It's not letting the plants dry out. There's no perlite or vermiculite that you would get in made seed mix, which just adds aeration and different other natural or other properties that garden soil in small plants don't have. So is that going to be super hard to split apart? Yeah. So to save it, if you really needed to, I would say get a grow light right away, put it over top, hopefully make the plants a little bit more sturdy and grow on a little bit, because you can tell they're still really young. They don't have their true leaves yet. They're still got their first leaves. So the roots are probably only a few, not even an inch long, so you're just going to break the plant. You can see right here, the plant's already bent and kind of not happy. So if you can get a grow light over top of that and harden those off and make them a little bit stronger before you try transplanting them, that would be the best. You're kind of stuck with the soil you have, but you have to be super careful not to overwater, or you're just going to rot all those really delicate edges right there. If you overwater that and it can't dry out to that 2 that we talked about, you're going to lose them all. So it was just everyone was talking about on the internet trying to help this guy, talking about how he wasn't using a light and it was clearly a window. I'm looking at the soil going, that soil was not prime. Like, even if it was a healthy plant and he had used lights, he's still going to come into contact. There isn't that air in the soil for it to dry out. And even now, separating the plants later, he's going to have trouble moving those plants apart. So we went into soil. So now your plant's ready to transplant. You've teased it apart, or you had just one in a cell. You can kind of look at the roots. This isn't a bad root system. This is probably a little too overgrown, but if you don't have time to move it, you don't. And this guy is kind of perfect. He's not quite root bound yet, but he's definitely wanting space. So when you go to transplant, you can actually, because these plants, the majority of them, you can actually stick into the pot a little bit deeper. So that way you don't have this huge block of soil underneath and this straggly guy. You can plant them up to about the crown. So you can bury that and it won't hurt the plant. Don't pack it in, because then you might just naturally sever it anyway. But just lightly, with light pressure, get it sturdy in the center of your pot or whatever you're using. And you will have a successful transplant. And then you just baby that way. Yeah, like I said, plant into moist soil. Make sure you're transplanting a watered transplant cell. So if it's dry or on the verge of being dry, the plant's at its weakest, and the soil's not going to hold together as well. So especially if you're teasing it apart, the plants, so water the day before or something. You don't want the plant soaking wet, but if you water the day before, you know you're going to transplant, and then that way the plant can be its strongest and most turgent. That way it'll better withstand all the manhandling it's about to receive. And yeah, stop doing that. Roots, yeah, so the roots have spread to the edge. Plant deeper up to the crown if you need to. I mean, tomatoes, if you get them that big, you can plant them all the way up to the first true leaves if they've really stretched. So like that guy wondering what to do. So once he's strengthened them, he can plant them up to there. So he can hopefully save them, but then that's why I say he should get them stronger before he transplants them, so that way when he's manhandling them, he doesn't snap them in the process, right? So that is, transplanting. Watering them at that point, you can start watering from the bottom. You can water from this bottom too. A lot of people say water from the bottom, because that way, once the roots have hit the bottom of the cell, you can start, so that way you're not getting the tops wet, which if there's no air movement, use a fan, they will rot or cause disease or mold or whatever. So, or if you're using fertilizer, then you might burn the leaves if you get the fertilizer on that, on the leaves. So, but if you're watering from the bottom, always make sure you can drain, because if you're watering from the bottom, you're going to get it up to that 5 level, and so you want that to drip out till you are happy it's at the lower end of a 4, so that there's no water still coming out, and you're going to put it back into the tray, and it's going to just now sit in its water. So however your system you devise to do that, make sure you're able to drain after you water. So especially from watering from the bottom, unless it all gets soaked up, in which case then you guessed right on how much water it needs. So that's not likely for me anyway. So yeah, there's that. And I mean, really, so these are I started trying to do soil blocking last year. So this is my first attempt at soil blocking. It went really well, and these plants I planted super late, so you can see how long that tomato is, right? And it's just growing in a little bit of soil. You can keep them growing in a small bit of soil. You don't have to, we need to know what soil blocking is. I didn't make this up, that was my bad. I was more using it as a demonstration. If you fertilize and water properly, you can keep the plant alive in a little bit of soil for a long time, right? But soil blocking basically, so everyone uses, the common use is plastic trays. Soil blocking, you get the water, and I'm about to totally contradict myself, soaking, the soil soaking wet, and it's a little kind of stamp punch, and it forms little cubes of soil that you can then put the seed into, and as that sprouts, you make bigger cubes of soil that have a hole that fit the smaller cube, and they go into that. And so the huge difference with that is, see how the roots kind of stop at the end and they're not circling like in these guys. These guys are starting to circle. This is called air pruning. So the roots actually are at the edge, so when you put them in the ground, the idea is they're ready to go. They're ready to start spreading, and you don't have this tangle of root that are pointing all over the place, and it goes all over the place. So soil blocking could be a whole nother, do people want me to explain the first processes? Okay. Who does it? Who has done it? Who's done soil? You saw it? Okay. It's a little bit different. It gets your head out of the box or out of the pot. Of plastic containers, or even it kind of goes on to the idea of those Jiffy pods where this roots, you can grow in those Jiffy pods that you expand in water and the roots don't get trapped in the plastic. But yeah, so like I said, I have a smaller container, a smaller Tupperware, and a soil mixture. There's tons of recipes online. I'm playing with one myself that I won't share because I'm trying to perfect it before I do. But they'll add worm castings, they'll add seedlings, or they'll make their own from coca core, and just trying to get it to stick together a little better. But basically, I mean, you can have success with just seedling soil and get it to a nice muddy, you squeeze it and it stays in that ball in your hand like a snowball. And then, so that's when you take a press. They're actually kind of expensive, but if you're going to use them instead of plastic pots, you save the money. And you start compacting it into these little divided cells. You can see here there's little spaces between them, so that there's it's gridded so that there's metal between, when you get non-plastic cells. So they're, instead of having plastic dividing it, it's just an airspace. And then you put the seed into each one, and you just do it the same way you would do any other seedling. You put it into your seed house with the heat and with the light and check on it. It will dry out quicker because it has the airspace around the cells, right? So at first it will dry out quicker, especially when you take off that the heat dome after they've sprouted. I looked, I hadn't checked for half a day, and yeah, my edge was dry already. So you just have to check a little bit more often. But they can grow in that, they can get pretty tall in these little, so they're maybe 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch the first size you do. Not big at all. And then as those, so you can kind of see the roots will start to naturally hold the soil together as it gets older. And then when you go to upplant, it's a bigger, same thing, stamp press, you pack the soil into it, and then they have adapters at the top that will punch a hole the size of your starting seedling press, and they fit satisfactorily into each other, and you just kind of put it in. The one thing I didn't like is if I let my tomatoes get a little tall, I had no way to really easily dig it deeper. So I've got to figure out that, right? Because it's a perfect size hole, so it has to be the perfect size transplant. But I kind of played with rolling it around itself, and it didn't die, so it worked. But yeah, this year I have to figure out, can I get that deeper or just transplant on time? But yeah, so it is a different method, and yeah, this is probably beginning of June that these guys, I was able to keep them alive till. So like there's nothing there, and I planted them probably this time last year, so March to June, and they did just fine. And so put them in the garden, and the roots just were happy to grow out. When I dug them out, there was no, like in the Jiffy pots, you pull the plant out in the fall, and you still have that mesh around the Jiffy pot, and you're like, ugh. And then there's no plastic pots to worry about. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. It's not too hard, soil blocking. And the most hard part is the investment in the soil blockers, but if you plan to keep doing it, it's cheaper than the pots. So yeah. All right. Yes. Oh yeah, perfect. Thanks. So this is exactly it. These are the little presses. And yeah, so it's just a hand punch. The soil goes in the black part in the bottom, and then you punch it down, and you lift the press up, and you get this nice little block of perfect soil things. And you can see, oops, where did you, I touched something. You can see these little divots here, so that's where the little dimples are that you would plant the seed into, so it stays in the soil block. And then if you scroll down a little bit, Ryan, you can kind of see, so that's the bigger size. So these ones are probably 3 by 5 or 4 by 5, so you get about 25 soil blocks. Oh, 20, there it says 20. And then this one's the larger size at 5. So it does increase the size quite a bit to go up, but it's still smaller than a 4 by 4 pot, or a 4-inch pot. And yeah, so that's, and you can see the price. But yeah, that's basically the system in a nutshell. If you wanted bigger, they do have large ones that are foot press, like big 1/2 inch size ones and whatnot. I don't know what you would use those for, but apparently there's applications for those. Yeah, perfect. Any questions? No. Either means I explained it all, or you guys are hungry.
Jen,
thank you guys.
The Lee Valley carries the soil blockers too.
Oh yeah.
Like if you want to see them before you buy them.
Right. Yeah. True.
Oh, that one
No,
said
that wasn't Lee Valley.
West
I thought
Coast.
that was West Coast
Yeah,
seeds.
but
Yeah.
I think I paid $99 for both.
Right, and I think I bought them from Lee Valley as well. So, yeah, they'll sell them in sets sometimes because they know you need one after the other. So, yeah, all right. Thank you guys so much for coming out. We always appreciate it, and we know that they're super specific talks, and so for you to stay, I hope it inspires you guys. And yeah, I know me and Christy love doing them. So, and we probably do them so that we could learn about it, and it's just us sitting in the crowd. So we're happy to have more than us sitting here.